Finally, Kyle, some intelligence on the program. Harman Dayal of The Athletic joins the show to help us dive into some offseason talk, and we're going to touch on his efforts to keep Elias Pettersson in Vancouver. That conversation starts right now. It's Beggsy, it's Bhawan, and it's Harman, and you're listening to Locked On Canucks.
You're Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for hitting the play button on today's episode of Locked On Canucks. My name is Trevor Beggs, Canucks writer and credentialed media member for Daily Hive Vancouver. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And before we dive into the show, we want to thank you for listening to Locked On Canucks, your team every day. Subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, on today's show, as mentioned, we have Harman Dayal. Again, as I'm talking to you right now, we've already talked to Harman Dayal, but I'm re-recording this intro because, hey, Wi-Fi cut out on me, and I basically was not in the conversation for the first 10 minutes. I know. I bailed out. Unbelievable. I wanted you guys to shine. That's the reason why.
You bailed out, and you left me there with, I don't even want to call him the whiz kid anymore. That's disrespect, the Harman Dayal. But man,
the man genius.
It was one-on-one in the trenches with Harman. Trying to give him the hockey questions. Come on, it was a good conversation though. I'm not gonna lie. That whole conversation about Ethan Bear and that next contract. I think it's big stuff for the Canucks. Again, I'm putting the hope out there that the Canucks know what they're doing, and next season's going to be nice. October, November, Canucks are going to play 20 games. They're going to be, like 14-4-2, and we're going to be optimistic.
Yeah. Sounds like you're overly optimistic. I know the sun's shining, so that's playing into it. But speaking of that conversation with Harman, let's cut to it now. It's Harman Dayal on this episode of Locked On Canucks.
Okay, I don't know where Trevor is. The Wi-Fi over there is just not working out. We still got Harman. We still got Kyle. Let's just get into this conversation. The presser, what did you take away from it? And are you believing the fact that Allvin won't use a buyout this offseason? Because it's got to happen. It doesn't make any sense for them not to, considering the fact that they're pretty much all in for next season.
Well, here's the thing. The language there was important and instructive there, right? Where it's like, we don't intend to. If they run into a situation where, and I believe them, right? I genuinely believe that they do not want to go the buyout route, which makes sense, considering when you sort of try and, let's say, buy a player like OEL out, sure, you might get the immediate cap relief, which is significant, but you're adding dead money onto the books for many, many years after, which this Canucks team, yes, it's all in for next season. Yeah, they've made a lot of investments to trying to turn this team around quickly, but this team's window hasn't even opened, right? We're still quite a ways away from this team becoming a legit contender. And if you have a scenario where, let's say, everything goes perfectly in terms of constructing this team and they're on the path to being an elite team in, let's say, 3-4 years, you don't want to be stuck in a situation where then you all of a sudden have OEL's dead money on the books holding you back from being able to take that step from becoming a good to great team. That's what Allvin cited. I'm sure part of it is also, I wonder if ownership even has a willingness to have more dead cap on the books. So, yeah, I absolutely believe that they intend not to buy players out, but if they end up stuck in a situation where they can't move money out and they have no other choice, could it be a last resort option? Maybe, but I'm certainly not betting on it. And I actually agree with them not wanting to use buyouts.
That was an interesting note too. I think, I can only speak for myself. I've been super irrational right now when it comes to the Canucks. I'm believing what they're doing only because I feel as if that's the only thing I got when it comes to being connected with the team. Like, I gotta hope that it's gonna turn around here. So I'm gonna note certain things that they do say, and at the same time they make moves like Hronek, and I'm like, oh, what's going on? That being said, Allvin did note that he doesn't want to use the buyout because he knows that will hurt the team down the road. And I think he alluded to the fact that down the road to him meant when the team was actually going to be competing for the cup. Like, that's going to hurt them. And that's language that I feel as if wasn't really being used at all when Benning was here.
Absolutely. Now, whether that's the legitimate reasoning for it, or whether it's a case of, again, ownership maybe just doesn't want to pay the hook for it, and they then, you know, they obviously want to convey a different message for the reasoning. You know, I don't know, but either way, it's encouraging. That's more of the messaging we need, right? That's more of the messaging that this franchise has lacked for years, is this sight on actually building a cup contender rather than just trying to squeak in to make the playoffs. Because you're right, for years under the Jim Benning administration, the discussion was about, we're trying to contend for the playoffs. We're trying to be competitive for the playoffs. We believe we have a team that can sneak in. It's like, that's not a recipe for building an actual contender. You need to have the ambition, the vision, the belief, the blueprint to become a top 5 team in the NHL. That's how you're actually going to bring a Stanley Cup home, because at the end of the day, if it's not the Stanley Cup, then what is all of this for, right? And you think about how good that 2011 team was. And if that 2011 team, which was loaded, right? President's Trophy in that sort of era. I'm not just talking about that year specifically, but that era with the Sedins. You know, both the Canucks had 2 Art Ross winners, right? Henrik Daniel, back-to-back years. They had Ryan Kesler, 40-goal scoring Selke Trophy winner, Roberto Luongo, Hall of Fame goaltender. That on top of that, the elite depth, and that team still couldn't win a Stanley Cup. It's instructive on how difficult it is to win a championship. And so it emphasizes and really underlines that, okay, you're not just going to take a half-baked approach to building a really high-quality team and somehow luck your way into the Stanley Cup.
It's not going to happen. You have to be ahead of the curve. And I think it was you who asked the question to Alvin regarding Ethan Bear and the next deal. And I think he made a joke alluding to the fact that he doesn't, think he's going to get a raise. And I feel as if it was a joke, but it was partially true, because they're going to need a lot of guys to take deals that allow them to play over their value. Like, they can't be trying to have, like, you get what I'm trying to say? I feel as if the Canucks are one of the few organizations in the league that have a lot of contracts that they're winning, and they need to win on this Ethan Bear deal. And it's not as if he showcased everything this year. I feel as if the Canucks still can get him under, $2 million, 1 year, 2 years. Like, I feel like they can still do that. They don't have to give him the bag. Oh, if Ethan Bear is signing a deal with the Canucks, predict the contract. Give me a number, bro. Give me a number.
It's interesting because I actually haven't dove into this specific number, so I'm sort of hesitant about giving a specific number. Obviously, if it's, let's say, a 1-year deal, first of all, I still think he's going to get a raise, just because he has a strong arbitration case, and that essentially means that, hey, if he's not happy with how these negotiations are going, he can file for arbitration. And considering the amount of minutes he's played, he has a pretty strong case. Plus, his qualifying offer is $2.2 million. So that's the bare minimum if you want to qualify and sort of retain his RFA rights. Now, there are obviously instances where players sometimes, if they don't feel like they had a good season, they sign below that qualifying offer number, which again is 2.2 for Ethan Bear. But based off the season that he had, and again, it wasn't a world-beating season or anything, but he's had a strong enough season, I think, to where he will command a raise. I think you're hoping for a number that is somewhere in the 2.5 million range. Let's say, like, just throwing a random number out there. If it's a 1-year deal, obviously, if you're looking for a 2 or 3 year deal, then you're getting into the territory of buying UFA years, and then you have to pay more in terms of the cap hit. So, I'd be shocked if the Canucks end up with Bear below 2 million. But your overall point about adding contracts onto the books where you have players that outperform those deals, that's critical, right? Because in this cap era, you have a limited pool of resources to work with, and it's not just about how many good players you have, it's about how many good players can actually fit under the cap. And for that to happen, you need players who outperform their contracts. And that's where look at the Bruins, for example, right? historic regular season. Well, guess what? One of the biggest reasons they've had this historic regular season is because their top six centermen, Patrice Bergeron, who's going to win the Selke Trophy again, and David Krejci make a combined $3.5 million against the cap. A combined $3.5 million for your top two centermen. David Pastrnak makes $6.66 million, right around the same as Brock Boeser, and he's scored more than 60 goals this year. So they don't have a single forward who makes more than $7 million. Like that right there is kind of the recipe. That's why they're able to fit so many good players below the cap. And of course, the Canucks don't have a window. Like they don't, like Bergeron and Krejci is a really unique window where those guys have spent, their entire careers in Boston virtually. And so they're willing to take huge pay cuts to contend for the Cup again. But overall, the point remains that you need surplus value contracts. And, that's where it's important for the Canucks to find more hidden gems like Dakota Joshua's, like Andrei Kuzmenko's coming in from Europe and scoring 39 goals on his entry-level contract. You look at Thatcher Demko and Quinn Hughes as surplus value contracts. Those guys are killing. Well, maybe not Demko this season, but in general, like for $5 million for the quality of starter he can be, that's a good contract to have on your books. Quinn Hughes being top 10, arguably top 5 defenseman in the league at under $8 million, like those are the contracts that you need more of.
Yeah, for sure. That's what you need more of. And I made the statement, Canucks don't have any players on this team outperforming their contracts. You mentioned Kuzmenko, you mentioned Joshua. They did that and then some. I do hope they do it again next season, and then we can make that statement. They're outperforming their deals. Let's try getting Trevor Beggs back on the program. You're listening to Locked On Canucks. Kyle, Harman, Trevor Beggs. Thanks for listening.
We're going to cut back to the conversation with Harman Dayal of The Athletic in a second. But first, grand slams, no-hitters, and double plays are back. And there's no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. Now, Kyle, I'm not a big Blue Jays fan, but I keep seeing them on TV. Looks like they're winning some games and they're doing pretty well right now. So if you want to, sprinkle some dollars on the Blue Jays, you won't catch me doing it. But if you want to do it, and you're feeling like you might want to make a couple bets there, you could do so on FanDuel with same game parlays by combining your bets for a chance at a bigger payout. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
Yeah, don't worry. We held it down, all right? Brown boys got it done right there, all right? You know what I'm saying? Come on.
Oh, I didn't doubt you guys for a second. There you go. We're back on Locked On Canucks, and specifically, I'm back on Locked On Canucks. I was sitting in the lobby with choppy Wi-Fi. It felt like 1995 out there, but it was nice hearing the insight that you guys had. Mainly Harman, no offense, Kyle, but
Right.
let's get to a couple more things here while we have Harman on the program. Harman, you recently wrote about analyzing the Canucks roster for 2023-24. And, there was 3 forwards who fell into one category, and that was Brock Boeser, Connor Garland, and Anthony Beauvillier. And I kind of want to get your thoughts on, which of those players do you think might get traded in the offseason? Or you could also just say, like, you think all 3 will be back. But kind of curious what you think the future's hold for those 3 players heading into next season.
Yeah, well, we know the Canucks need to shed cap space, right? That's such an obvious priority for the organization heading into this offseason. And when you look at, we're not going to move Oliver Ekman-Larsson's contract. He's got the no move clause, and unless you exercise a buyout, which doesn't sound like the Canucks want to do, you're going to be stuck with that deal. Tyler Myers, yeah, you'd love to move that contract, and he only has a year left, but his bonus is paid out September 15th. So that's sort of a case where his contract doesn't become feasible for teams to take on until that point of the season once the bonus is paid out and an ownership group is looking at him and going, all right, well, he's only owed $1 million in actual cash. So this is a way to sort of, hit the floor hit the salary cap floor without paying a lot in actual cold hard cash. So those back-end contracts being difficult to move, obviously you would have looked at even a player like Tanner Pearson, right? You obviously hope that he can come back healthy, but the fact that you like from the Canucks standpoint, they can't bank on him being on LTIR in all likelihood because there is still a possibility that he could play next season. So that means like you still have to factor in or at least operate in a way where you have to account for the possibility that he might be on the roster at some point in the season. So with that in mind, you then have a lot of contracts, specifically on the wings for mid-range players, where that has to be your avenue to carve out cap flexibility. When you look at the needs on at center ice, when you look at the needs on the back end, those guys stand out in terms of, I think it's one of Boeser or Garland that has to be the top priority in terms of shedding one of those guys out. From there, it might be difficult, though, because I bet if there was an appealing exit route for the Canucks, they would have already done that at this past trade deadline. And we saw last offseason, for example, a lot of unexpected, highly talented wingers hit the market. And in some part because when teams were up against a cap there, all of them were thinking the same thing, let's get rid of a winger. So that creates an environment where we know supply and demand. You have situations where wingers just weren't, teams weren't as interested in those types of players. And so that's where you had even sort of unexpected guys like Kevin Fiala traded, Alex DeBrincat traded, Matthew Tkachuk, and as a result, Jonathan Huberdeau as well, traded like legit game breakers, even had Oliver Bjorkstrand. So it's like, if those caliber of players are moving, then why would a team be as interested in taking on sketchy winger contracts, right? And that's where Boeser and Garland are good players, but I bet a lot of teams look at them and go, they're not worth their contracts right now. So that's going to be the key, is seeing how the winger market develops. How many other options do teams have in being able to find scoring talent on the flanks? Because again, like wingers are like the most easily replaceable commodity, as opposed to centers and defensemen, where those are the areas teams are like, okay, we're actually willing to sort of pay up for this area. And that's where we'll see how it proceeds with Boeser and Garland. Obviously, it's nice that they had a run down the stretch with them being a lot more productive and valuable. If those contracts are difficult to move, then that's where you may look at a player like Anthony Beauvillier, who has less term on his contract, which teams don't like wingers with a lot of term. So, he's probably more liquid asset in that sense. Plus, he costs less against the cap. And we saw him produce a lot with Elias Pettersson down the stretch. That might be the sort of player who, if you can't move Boeser and Garland, that might be the easier deal to move, even though you may prefer to move a contract like Boeser or Garland.
Yeah, and I think Kyle and I even mentioned that around the trade deadline that, maybe Anthony Beauvillier, I mean, like you said, he's the most liquid asset, lowest amount of term, lowest cap hit. He might be the easiest to trade. But maybe I'll ask it this way, Harman. How would you handicap the odds of all three of those players being on the Canucks opening roster for opening night?
I'd be shocked if all three of them are on the roster. And if they are, like, it's not good for the Canucks, like, at all. Because then how else are you going to upgrade, let's say, the third line center position, which they've identified as priority? How else are you going to find another top four defenseman? I mean, you're capped out. Like, something has to give, and if those wingers aren't moving, then what else is it going to come down to? Are you going to change your mind last minute and buy all of ekman-larsson out? Are you going to have to all of a sudden look at your first round pick and go, is this an avenue for us to package with something else to help make the sort of move where it's like not a pure cap dump, but it's like, we take this first round pick, we acquire, let's say, a quality top four defenseman, and along with that, we send out an inefficient contract, which allows us to afford the incoming top four defenseman. Like, are you then looking at those types of possibilities? I mean, you don't want to be stuck in an environment where you're looking at possibilities like that. So I'd be really surprised if all three of those wingers are on the roster for next season, and if they are, the Canucks are in trouble.
Oh yeah, 100%. And the Canucks, they can't be making moves like that. They mentioned how the reason why they wouldn't buy out, they didn't say ekman-larsson, but money like that, because it would affect the team down the road when they're actually contending for a cup. What else would affect the team, that wants to contend for the cup? Having guys making not a lot of money, doing a lot of things. And chances are, that first round pick that you're using this year turns out to be something. I know it's hard to hit on the first round, but it can't be hard for this team anymore. If you're struggling to be in the top 16 every year and you're finishing in the bottom 10, you got to hit on these first round picks, and it's got to happen for this team. Oh man, Harman talked about 2011 10 minutes ago, and then you just talked about Connor Garland and Brock Boeser like that. This is one of the saddest episodes I've. Come on, man.
You're always sad, man.
No,
You're
it's
always
Tuesday.
sad. You know, you got to
It's
cheer up, man.
Tuesday.
The NHL playoffs are on, man.
This-
It's all good.
This is a tough gig, yo. Living with the Canucks for an hour a day, like actually living with the Canucks, just thinking about it, it's like, whoa, dude. I'm just not feeling it right now, man. It's dark out here, man.
Yeah, Harman, yesterday, Kyle, I mentioned Alvin's quote about, oh, we actually have 2 years to re-sign Elias Pettersson, and Kyle walked up and he left. I thought he was gone for good, but thankfully he's back here. Yeah, so tough times. So we were talking about Connor Garland, and one of the reasons why those three are more expendable is because of the emergence of Andrei Kuzmenko. Oh, did I lose you guys?
No, we're good.
You're good.
There was the emergence of Andrei Kuzmenko. Harman, I wanted to ask you, I think Kuzmenko aside, because he was easily the most surprising player on the roster this season. Who surprised you most among Canuck players aside from Kuzmenko?
That's a good question. I would say, probably Dakota Joshua is my sort of initial guess. Obviously Phil Di down the stretch as well, but that was only 30 games. But yeah, Joshua, to have a fourth liner who can score, anytime you have a fourth liner who scores more than 10 goals, you're laughing. Like, who's in double digits. Like, that's the type of quality depth that you need down the lineup. Plus, he led the team in hits after, of course, Luke Schenn wasn't on the roster anymore. You look at his size, look at his ability to win battles, be effective on the forecheck, and you sort of compare that to also game one of the playoffs, watching the Wild and Stars go at each other, watching the Oilers and Kings go at each other. Like, that's big boy hockey. Like, that is physical, in the trenches. Guys are hitting each other. You can't be intimidated in those environments. And I don't mean to go all, size and toughness and it's not about fighting all the time and intimidating teams in that way. But you can't be a team that backs down from that side of the game. You have to be the type of club that can rise to the occasion when games get chippier, when they become more intense. Because look, regular season playoffs aren't the same at all. They just aren't. In the regular season, it's an 82-game marathon. You have all the travel involved. Guys aren't going as hard because they know you have to pace yourself. You have to, leave something in the tank. When the playoffs start, you don't know how quickly your season could end. It's an all-out sprint. Everybody is desperately doing everything possible to win those games. There's a new level of desperation, and as a result, you see the intensity and physicality rise, and that's where a player like Dakota Joshua becomes a lot more valuable, to where the Canucks don't have enough of those types of players who are hard to play against, who, again, it's not like Joshua is fighting every game. Like, that's not the point. It's about, can you win battles in tight? Can you win battles along the walls? Can you be the sort of player that excels in those types of environments? And even with Dakota Joshua showing some penalty killing utility down the stretch, he's got a unique archetype, right? Where he does a little bit of everything. He scores. He's got hands in tight. He forechecks. I was impressed with his development.
Yeah, and I think Kyle and listeners of the show know I'm a big Dakota Joshua fan. I've been pumping this guy's tires almost every day in the month and a half since we've done this show. Big season for him. Harman, one of the main reasons I actually wanted to get you on the show was, first and foremost, to pump your tires, because you were pumping Elias Pettersson's tires. That piece you wrote about him after he hit 100 points was a great piece. Go check it out on The Athletic if you got the subscription. Free plug right there. You're welcome, Harman. I kind of wanted to ask you, though. Yeah, of course, man, of course. I kind of wanted to ask you, how did you put the story together? Like, how did you go about finding the guys that you talked to for the story, and maybe mention to the listeners some of the players you did end up interviewing?
Yeah, so it's interesting because a lot of times when teams come into Rogers Arena, the road teams are available in terms of you can go into the locker room, talk to guys as well. So I just took the opportunity over the last sort of 2-3 years dating back to my first year on the beat, to talk to other Swedish players about Elias Pettersson, his own peers, guys who have spent time with him playing for Sweden at the World Championships or at the World Juniors. And it was really interesting to get their insight, first to talk to them about their transition coming over from Sweden to the NHL because it's such a different game. And then hearing their insights on Pettersson, right? It was really cool hearing, for example, a guy like Kalle Järnkrok, talk about how he keeps up with the SHL a lot. And it's like he knew right away that Pettersson was going to be a star before anybody in North America knew. So it was like cool to sort of hear him go like, yeah, we knew this guy was legit before the rest, like he was joking, before the rest of you North American guys. To sort of, have those types of stories and like to also have the player's perspective where it's like, yeah, Järnkrok was saying it wasn't just the skills, it was the elite level of work ethic, right? And that's what separates Pettersson a lot of times on the ice, is how hard he's working away from the puck and really working on his skills to sort of take the next step. So I ended up, obviously talking to Järnkrok, Mika Zibanejad, Marcus Naslund, Jacob Markstrom, a lot of high-end sort of Swedes who are really familiar with his game. And it was really, really cool. Just, game recognizes game. And I loved, Victor Arvidsson, for example. I love the way he put it, where it's like, he said, Pettersson is just too smart to struggle in terms of how he plays on the ice. And he didn't necessarily mean it in terms of, he'll never have stretches where he slows down, because we, of course, saw stretches from Pettersson earlier in his career, but just big picture, like he's too smart not to be an elite player in this league. And that checks out when you watch him play.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
You noticed that right away. We noticed it in year one. And you mentioned it, game recognizes game. And it's just the truth. I think it's easy to recognize that Pettersson is just a lot better than most of the best players in the NHL. And it's funny how you said game recognized game, because I was at some party on Saturday night, and I was rocking a Peter Forsberg jersey, and some dude came up to me and he's like, yo, sick jersey, man, sick jersey. And right away I felt like a phony, because I was like, damn, bro. So I didn't know nobody watches hockey here. I got to let this guy know that I'm not even an Avs fan. I'm a diehard Canucks fan, but I got to rock this jersey because it's Peter Forsberg. And he said, no, for real though, game recognizes game. Everyone should be rocking Peter Forsberg jerseys. And Marcus Naslund mentioned Peter Forsberg's name in your piece, and that really, it just made me think a lot, because there is an edge to Pettersson's game. It's not like his physical traits. He's not the biggest dude in the world. He's the furthest thing from Peter Forsberg, but there's something really, really gritty about Pettersson. I know both of you guys have been watching more Pettersson over the years. You see him live more. Don't you think Tocchet sees that too? He sees that. And I feel as if I'm all over the place when it comes to who's going to be the captain for the Vancouver Canucks. Yesterday, I was like, oh, Quinn Hughes is going to get it. Then I kind of talk about Pettersson. I'm like, dude, this guy's that guy. Have you guys been thinking about that more? Quinn Hughes, Pettersson, who the captain's going to be?
Well, here's the thing. It's not easy to make that judgment from the outside, because, look, in terms of on the ice setting a positive example, you can't go wrong either way.
Yeah.
What we won't be as privy to on the outside is what happens behind the scenes, in the sense that being captain requires strong interpersonal skills. It's like you have to be the bridge between the coach and the players and sort of bringing the team together. And look, inevitably on a team, you have hyper-competitive athletes who not only are trying to win, but also everybody's are playing for their next contract, right? Everybody wants to put up the points. Everybody wants to play on the power play. Everybody wants to play on the penalty kill. Everybody wants to be in a top six role next to players like Pettersson and JT Miller. Not everybody's going to get that opportunity. And in a team setting, it doesn't matter if it's hockey, basketball, it doesn't matter if it's professional, amateur, some guys are going to get less opportunity than others. Some guys are going to feel slighted. You're never going to have everybody's happy with their role and opportunity and the level of responsibilities they have. And so that's where it's incumbent on the leadership group to foster a level of environment where it's, not only team above else, but as a captain, you've got to be able to sort of resolve some of those conflicts, help guys see the bigger picture, And look, players, when they see a vision, when they see a team's actually going somewhere, when they see that, okay, we've got a chance to legit win something here, they can look past that less than ideal opportunity. I think back to, for example, the 2019-20 season when the Canucks were so tight-knit, it was like a wolf pack. And Troy Stecher, earlier in his career, had played top 4 minutes, and he ended up in more of a marginalized sort of number 6D role. His minutes were slashed. And you could tell it hurt him. But he was able to look past it because he could tell, okay, we've got a special young core here, we've got some veteran leaders as well. Like, this team is going somewhere. So he was able to sort of buy into that, and it was never a problem. He was the ultimate teammate. And that's where, for the Canucks to sort of foster that environment to take the next step, that's part of it too, is being able to sort of set a vision for players to buy into and believe in, to trust the process. And part of that, and a big part of that, comes down to the leadership group and your captain. And you've got to be the sort of player that, look, when things hit the fan in a season, when you are blowing a ton of leads and guys are bickering back and forth at each other, as a captain, you've got to be able to get everybody pulling on the same rope. And that's a factor that on the outside, we aren't as clued into in terms of who has those communication skills and who doesn't. And I mean, look, I do think we have a bit of insight into that. Like, earlier in the season, I was working on a story about Quinn Hughes' leadership, and definitely based off personalities and knowing people who are close to each of them, Hughes strikes me as being a lot more comfortable being vocal. He's taken a bit bigger step in that role, whereas Pettersson's definitely more of a shy, reserved, quiet personality. Probably doesn't excel as well in those environments. But that's the intangible unknown that I think is going to be crucial, because look, at the end of the day, in terms of work ethic and competing hard and everything on the ice, you're not going to go wrong either way in terms of Pettersson or Hughes.
Yeah, it's funny, boys. We started this conversation over the last few minutes talking about Elias Pettersson, and as soon as we did that, the sun came out on my end. Look at that, the power of Elias Pettersson. Not only is he one of the best players in the NHL, but he controls the weather. And Harman, after hearing the 2 to 3 years of work you put on that Pettersson story, I hope that Pettersson doesn't resign with the Canucks for the city, for the people. I hope he does it for you.
No,
man. Pumping his tires.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll
do it for Harman Dayal. Come on.
I'm sure he'll look at that and be like, oh boy, now I have to sign for 8 years. Yeah, that'll be what pushes it across the line.
Okay, I got something. I know we're running out of time here, but I got something to add, because you made me think about how, like, the captain has to set the vision, and whether Pettersson's the captain or not, he's still one of the biggest leaders on the team. I wonder if he's considering that going into this negotiation too. Like, does he take a little bit less? I know that sounds so crazy, because he already kind of did that with his little mini bridge deal type of thing that he signed and the Canucks set him up for. But I wonder if part of the vision setting for this team moving forward is like, Pettersson, maybe you got to take $750K less, $500K less. I don't know.
No, it's
you mentioned Boston. Boston started doing that a long time ago. It was just yeah.
But for that to work, you need to be a good team, and the player has to trust. Like, the 2011 core all took less, right? The Sedins, Kessler, Luongo, those guys. But that was because they saw a vision that, okay, like if I take less, we can keep this other guy, and we have a chance to win the Stanley Cup. There's no possibility for that on the horizon for Elias Pettersson right now. So especially when you look at all the contracts that even the last administration handed out, go get your bread, man. Like, he's deserved it, and there's no reason for him to take a hometown discount, even though look, it'd be in the team's best interest. I'm not getting greedy here. Just sign 8 years, blank check. I'm happy.
No, 100%.
Yeah, there you go. Well, Harman, I had a few questions to ask you, maybe to wrap up in a speed round, but we're running out of time, so I'm just going to ask you one. I'm curious, just to get to know your taste a bit better. What are you bumping on your playlist right now? What song is stuck in your head?
Ooh, that's a good question. I guess more an individual artist. Jack Harlow. Big Jack Harlow guy. So not necessarily his new album. I don't think his new album was it was all right. It wasn't bad, but 2017, 2018, 2019, some of his older music. You listen to songs like Dark Knight or A song like, I'm trying to think, what was the song that was Knack for It? Like just really vibey songs. Like he's been killing it, and that's definitely in my gym playlist a lot these days.
Yeah,
There you
Jack
go.
Harlow, man. Listen to that project, Trevor. That's what they all say. Come on, man. You're gonna enjoy that project by Jack Harlow. And if you're new to the show, or if Harman's new to Trevor's music taste, remember Trevor doesn't listen to any Justin Timberlake. No Justin Timberlake.
That's not even 100% true, but
Oh,
I
come
wish it
on, bro.
was.
This guy hates JTs out there, man. I'm telling you, man. Nobody hates more than Trevor Beggs, man.
Well, whether I hate JT or not, one thing I did love was this conversation. Even if I was in the background for the first 10 to 15 minutes, Harman Dayal, you're a beauty, buddy. I appreciate you hopping on this episode of Locked On Canucks. Kyle and I are going to wrap up in comment corner, but first, I need to tell you about a product that I literally use every day. AG1 by Athletic Greens. Maybe you're like me. You want to be healthy and eat well, but it's always easier said than done. That's no longer the case with AG1. With one delicious scoop of AG1 in a glass of water each day, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. All the things. It can be hard and expensive to keep track of multiple different supplements and vitamins, not to mention how hard it can be on your stomach. But AG1 costs you less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than your cold brew habit. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance.
Okay, you're back on Locked On Canucks. Trevor Beggs, Kyle Bhawan. Shout out to Harman for being Harman. Again, a tough job, man. You guys have a tough job out there. I know. It's just hockey. It's just the NHL. Blah blah blah. But sitting down with the mediocre and spending hours within assumption is just nuts. It's just nuts. You know who's not nuts? The people. People watching this program are the reason why we're doing this. We're nothing without the everydayers, right? Locked On Canucks. Your team every day. Comment corner, saving the best for last. We had one comment on our last episode, and it was from Corey John. First of all, this guy leaving a comment on our show. His name's Corey John. This guy cannot be trusted. No, honestly, come on. Serial killer, maybe. Okay, 5 out of 6 games out is fair. It has to be said. This was referring to Alvin saying, we're only 5 out of 6 games out of the playoff mark. And I was hating on that. Like, don't mention that stuff. Don't compare us to the standings. Just, blah, blah, blah. This guy got mad at it, and he said, your examples of media and Canucks coverage is bad. You want Drance's job. Just become Drance. Just don't become Drance. He's almost done. So I don't know what he has against Thomas Drance right at the end of that one. Just a hammer. He didn't even come after. He got mad at us and then went there.
Yeah, it's funny. On an episode where we had Durance's colleague Harman Dayal on the show, we got a comment trashing Thomas Durance. Look, Thomas Durance isn't going anywhere. I know, love him or hate him. The guy is incredibly articulate and good at what he does. People just don't like that constant negativity. And obviously this guy didn't like our negativity in terms of calling out the Canucks, which is fair. It's sports fandom should be what you want it to be. And if you want to be optimistic, I think that's a good thing. Me personally, I'm a bit jaded from, watching this team my entire life, especially them, be one of the worst teams in the league over the past 10 years. So I respect the optimism. And Corey John, whether you can be trusted or not, we appreciate you leaving a comment and listening.
Corey John, man. You know what? We always say it, right? Love us or hate us, agree with us or not. It's go Canucks go. And same thing with the people leaving comments, it's kind of bashing. It is what it is. It happens, man. It happens out here. It happens, man. Is it our negativity? It's not just ours. It's everyone's, okay? We're watching the Canucks, and I don't know how you can be optimistic right now. And, that comment or those games that Alvina referring to, when you're just talking to the media, you don't want to use numbers to compare yourself to a team in the middle of the pack, You get what I'm saying? So he's 5 or 6 games out of what? Out of what? Being the Flames? Being the Jets? It's just relax, buddy. It would have been way harder if he said we were 15 to 20 games away from the Lightning. Just something, I don't know, squeeze it in there. That would have been sick. That would have been nice. He's a bit all over the place with his approach when it comes to what, like, you know what I'm saying? If his messaging was more straightforward, because he did drop that reference to why he wouldn't want to buy out. If the language was more clear, I think it'd be easier for us. But hey, man, we're irrational right now. We're emotional. Hey, some of you aren't. Some of you are hopeful and calm, and that's cool too. At the end of the day, we're all in this together. Go Canucks, go! And shout out to Surrey.
Go Canucks, go. Kyle, I know you mentioned buyouts, and Alvy made some interesting comments about buyouts. I know, again, you and Harman touched on it while I was lost in cyberspace early on in this episode, but I think we should dive into it more later this week on Locked On Canucks. Should the Canucks actually buy out Oliver Ekman-Larsson? I know you and I got opinions on it, so make sure you're checking that out later this week. But for now, we thank you and appreciate you for tuning in to this episode of Locked On Canucks, your team every day. Shout out to the everydayers, and if it's your first time listening, welcome, and we love you. Aside from the buyout conversation, Kyle 420 is coming up later this week. I want to say two things with 420. First and foremost, let's get to 420 subscribers on YouTube. I know we're really close right now.
Oh, we're already there. We're already there, man.
We're already there. Woo! There we go.
This is how much Beggsy, he wanted it for the content. He didn't want to get to 420 before 420. He wanted to,
No, that's cool.
Content,
That's cool.
Lead it. He just views you guys as pawns, whereas Kyle Bhawan.
No.
Fans of the people.
Holy.
It's not 422 subscribers. It's 422 Canuck fans.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I do want to, on Thursday's episode on 420, shout out to the people who partake and who post, but I do want to get into some of the greatest 420 moments in Canucks history. What does that mean? I don't know. You'll have to check out our episode later this week on Locked On Canucks. But for now, I'm Trevor Beggs. He's Kyle Bhawan, and we thank you for listening to Locked On Canucks, your team every day.
We should have had Harman on the 420 episode.
You're Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.